Alright guys, welcome back to another video here. So over the past few years I've gotten questions every winter about my tip-up setup for trout. So I'm going to kind of go over that today. Mostly talking about the leaders and hooks that we use and what we spool our tip-ups with and everything. So everything that I can I will link down in the description for you guys. So if you want to set your traps up like this, you can go and find the line, the hooks, the weights, everything that you need to get started for this. I just got these two new Jack Trap, the 20-inch standards, so it's the smallest traps that they make. And so I figured I might as well do a video of spooling them up. See, still got the tag on there. So these are my 30-inch standards that I use, I've been using for years. The size difference is huge. The reel, this is a 3-inch reel, this is a 4-inch reel. Just holds more line and it's a little bit bigger for when the ice is thicker. You're not sitting way up in the hole, you're deep down there, so your reel doesn't freeze up, and it's nice and long for fishing longer lake trout sets, things like that, so you can see them better. But these little guys right here are perfect for early ice when you're fishing on just a few inches of ice and you don't want that reel to sit down way under the ice. You know, if you're fishing in 2-3 feet of water and the reel's sitting down below the ice, that reel is going to spook the fish when they come in. So having a shorter trap that sits up higher in the hole, even building up the size a little bit with snow that you've drilled out your hole to raise that up just under the water so it's not down below the ice, really makes a difference on getting flags or not. But I don't know, I like jack traps a lot. I like how sensitive they are, how light they trip. There's no drag mechanism at all, so just it's a hair trigger to set that off. So if you guys want to check those guys out, jacktraps.com. I'm not sponsored by them whatsoever. I wish I was, but I'm not. So anyways, we're gonna go over on how we actually set this up. When you buy the jack traps anyways, you have the option of having them spooled with line. So the line that's on here is a Dacron. It's a braided Dacron line that's wax coated, and the wax coating just helps it, not absorb as much water and freeze up on you. Over time, if you use these a lot, like this other set I have here, the wax coating will pretty much be gone. You can see the thickness of that. I think this is about a 35-pound breaking strength. I don't know if the camera can really pick that up. See if I can put her here. You can see the thickness of that. The thickness and the breaking strength is not for catching 35-pound fish, obviously. The reason we use this thicker Dacron ice trap specific line is because you're hand lining the fish, and having that little bit thicker line helps feel everything and helps pull that line in a little better, as opposed to using, if like 30-pound braid is pretty thin that you'd use on like a bass setup or like bait caster setup. It's much thinner than this is going to be, and that would be pretty hard on your hands if a fish want to take a nice long run and probably cut right into your hand. Just look for an ice specific Dacron that's made for tip-up fishing, and it'll be a thicker diameter. So once you've spooled that up, you can see this reel is not full, and there's a reason for that, and that's because I believe when they wind these up in the shop, you can see how tightly that's wound on the spool. You can see how much they must do it with a drill or some type of winding device that gets it nice and tight laid on there. On this one, I've used it a lot, and you can see how bad it's wound on there, because over time, if you get completely spooled to the knot with all your line out and you're winding it back up, it's going to be so much looser on that reel. You can see that it sits further out on the reel than that other one does. They're basically giving you room for error, because once you've stripped a bunch of line out and you go ahead and wind that all back on, it's never going to be that tight and nice and even again. So when you do wind them on and you get them nice and tight yourself, I would recommend leaving a nice gap there, just a little buffer zone for you. So now we're going to attach the leader. So first thing you want to do is cut your line, get a nice squared off end there, and then grab a barrel swivel. You can see this is a pretty small swivel. This is like a micro swivel, but it's an 80-pound breaking strength. So the line's going to break long before this swivel is going to. We're just going to do a regular old fisherman's knot, improved clinch knot I think it's called. But it's a knot that you have to do with braid a lot on like bait casters and stuff, because braid tends to slip, and this is basically braid. So got that on there, and then you could probably run that for seasons just like that, and then just change out your leader. So for leader material, I always use fluorocarbon. Unless maybe you're pike fishing, maybe you have like a steel leader at the end, but fluorocarbon is what you want to use. It's the strongest and most abrasion resistant line. So with fluorocarbon, and this goes the same for any leader really, you want to use the heaviest leader that you possibly can get away with without spooking the fish. I would recommend for brook trout using a 6-pound or 8-pound fluorocarbon. I have the Seaguar stuff, but any fluorocarbon is going to work well. If you get a pickerel on there and it nicks the tooth of that pickerel, it's going to fray your line, and that 6-pound might just cut right through it. So I'm going to beef it up to an 8-pound. For these small little brookie traps, you don't need a long leader at all. You're going to be setting these in anywhere from 2 to 6 feet of water. I always fish the upper part of the water column when I'm fishing for brook trout. If you're in 3 feet of water, I put it right under the ice. Even at 6 feet, right under the ice works really well for brook trout. And we don't want a lot of this on the spool, because if you get a lot of that that's staying on the spool wound up, it tends to kind of work its way off and get some memory like this and pop off and get stuck down in here and pinch your line a little bit. So having just the right amount of leader is fine. If you're gonna have a ton of line out, put the biggest leader that you can on. I'm gonna do like an arm's length of leader for this. So then we're gonna take our swivel here, tie this on the other side of the swivel, same exact knot, wet it. You always wanna wet the knot for fluorocarbon so you don't chafe and burn that line and weaken it. So here you go, here's our main line to our swivel to our fluorocarbon, right there. The tried and true #1 hook that I've been using, and it's my favorite hook by far, Gamakatsu octopus hooks. They make these in different colors. As you can see, we got a red here, we got like a black nickel, I've got pink in here. So they make a whole different bunch of color chartreuse, but my favorite ones are the red and then just the natural black nickel, and sometimes those pink ones work really well too if you're fishing for stock trout. For brook trout, I would stay with size 6 to a size 8. These are size 8, and actually the size 8 is probably going to be a little bit better for you. So I'm going to put on the size 6 today in the black nickel. And that's only because I'm going to be fishing for stock trout. They're not all that finicky. If you're fishing for wild and native fish, you're probably going to want to downsize, but these will probably actually work really well. This is the size we're going with here. You can barely see it in my hand, but you just go ahead and tie that right on to the end of your fluorocarbon. The treble hooks, they just cause a lot of problems in general. If you want to argue that, leave it down in the description below. The only time you might want to use a treble hook is if you're using like some type of dough bait or maybe like a quick strike rig for larger fish. You know, you set that line with your hand and all the pressure is going to that one single point instead of spreading out over 3, and it just hooks them so nice right in the corner of the mouth. Now the last thing you got to do is just put a weight on. If you put this in just like this, you drop that down with your minnow or worm, crawler, whatever you're going to use for bait on there. If you put this down there, and especially if you have a minnow on here, it's going to swim around and it's going to tangle and tie knots in this line, and it might even come up into the hole and wrap around your reel and stuff. So you want to make sure that you put a little bit of weight on here just to get the bait down and keep it under your reel and not all tangled up. Up here in Maine, we can't use lead, so these are all lead-free sinkers here. And because this is not going to be very deep, I'm going to pick out the smallest split shot that I have. Now, the placement of this doesn't really matter too much, but you don't want to get it too close to your bait that it spooks the fish. 8 inches above the bait, and then depending on where you set your line in the lake that day, you can adjust that, slide it up and down. But right there, you can see there's my hook, and there's that. And that's my setup for brook trout. Now, the other thing you can do if you don't want to tie your own leaders on there, I tie directly to the hook. There's a lot of people out there that will put like a snap swivel on the end of this and use those pre-tied or snelled hooks by like Eagle Claw or whatever with the loops in them. The leader that comes on those is so short and it's so much thicker than what you would use. It's like a 20-pound line, and it's a monofilament, so it's not as, you know, it stands out more in the water. But so tying your own is always better. I've noticed a difference fishing with other people that use those. We just get more bites when we tie our own and make it a little more streamlined. Another option that is really good actually is Maine Pro Series makes leaders with hooks all on them, and they actually have some pretty cool hooks. They have glow hooks, little spinners and stuff, different colored hooks with flash on them. So you can definitely check those out. They come with a pre-tied leader that's actually long enough to tie right onto that swivel if you wanted to. This is what I used to do when I was a kid, and I see a lot of people still do this, is they reel their line up at the end of the day. Their line's all wet. And then you go, well, what am I gonna do with this hook just hanging here? And they end up sticking it in the line so it doesn't come unraveled in your pack basket or whatever you're doing. And that's probably the worst thing you can do, because you're weakening your line by running your hook through that. The best thing out there right now that I found is another Maine Pro Series product, the reel wraps. A very simple product. I use them on all my traps, and they're the best ones out there that I found so far. So we'll just take one of these out and show you real quick what they are. I'll link them down in the description below. They're just a piece of Velcro with a couple grommets on it. And I like these narrower ones. They make a couple different kinds, but the small narrow ones work well because they allow your line to dry out at the end of the day without actually taking them off. So what you do is you take your hook here, put this grommet right into the hook, and then we just wrap this around the reel like so. Wrap it around a couple times and it just sticks to itself because it's Velcro. And there you go. Nice and contained, no hooks going through your line. You can shove it in the pack basket, it's not gonna get all tangled up, and you're ready to go for the next day. We got snow out in the backyard. The ice is coming this week, so we're getting rigged up. Thanks for watching, guys. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Let me know how you rig your traps up down in the description below, and we'll catch you guys in the next video.